with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, June 21st, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Stephen Wertheim, the director of the Quincy Institute's Grand Strategy Program, a research scholar at the Saltzman Institute of War and Peace Studies at Columbia University, author of Tomorrow the World, The Birth of U.S. Global Supremacy. With the message, NATO, not necessarily your friend. Also on the program today, U.S. is withdrawing anti-missile systems from the Middle East. And just as Republicans land on weaponizing it, inflation worries start to ease. Meanwhile, massive anti-Bolsonaro protests in Brazil as the COVID death rate tops 500,000 people. Hardliner wins in Iran's fairly dubious presidential election. Senate to vote on voting rights tomorrow, certain to fail. White House looks to end Title 42. That's the COVID-related migrant family expulsion program by the end of July. Meanwhile, Catholic bishops want to limit communion for Biden because he believes in a woman's right to choose. Conservative Democrats want to slow the antitrust roll in the House. The VA to provide gender confirmation surgery. And lastly, this morning, the Supreme Court of the United States opens the door for college athletes to be paid. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. It is the beginning of the week. It's exciting. It's Monday. And forgive me if I was a little bit thrown off because...
You had a realization.
Is today Dress Like Sam Day? What is going on here? Like what?
Well, I mean, Matt and Brendan aren't dressed like Sam.
No, I know. They are not.
Well, I'm supposed to dress for the job I want, which is to just take over.
There you go.
And
there you go. All right. Well,
and make sure you're irrelevant.
I don't. We've been sitting here this whole time next to each other, and I didn't notice until I look into the camera and realize, like, wait a second. All right, we've got a lot to get to in a very short period of time. So let's get to it right now, ladies and gentlemen. What we present to you now is a tale of two pities. Both Republican stalwarts looking for support from various constituencies. Let's start with Mike Pence. He is at the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Is that what it is? Meeting. What could be more Mike Pence-y than Faith and Freedom Coalition? But unfortunately, Mike Pence, and don't get me wrong, I'm completely in favor of the crowd's reaction to Mike Pence, but probably not for the same reasons. Here he is, not getting necessarily the type of warm welcome that he anticipated. Things are looking a little bleak for Mike Pence's 2024 run.
It is great to be back with so many patriots dedicated to faith and freedom and the road to the majority. And I want to thank my friend Ralph Reed for those overly generous words. I'm deeply humbled by them. Ralph Reed knows me well enough to know The introduction I prefer is a little bit shorter. I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order, and I am honored to stand before you today.
Wow, a lot of people yelling that he's a traitor.
Well, yeah. I mean, he did not change the outcome of the election, so there you have it.
Mike Pence is going to face a little bit of headwinds, it seems like, going forward, but very brave of him.
Going to break, I think.
Yeah, the fever. I think it's just a matter of time. Meanwhile, Ron Johnson, and Johnson's up for re-election in 2024. We talked about the other day, 2022. We talked the other day that there may be some pickup opportunities for the Democrats in the Senate. Ron Johnson could be one of those pickups. I mean, here he is, not doing so well with. He showed up at a Juneteenth celebration. You'll recall last year, Ron Johnson was the one who basically voted it down by saying, like, I don't understand why we would pay federal employees to take a day off to celebrate the end of slavery. Can't figure that one out, Ron Johnson. And here are people have not forgotten. Yeah, a little bit uncomfortable for Ron Johnson there, but hopefully he has even more problems going forward as he starts to get ready for his run for re-election in 2022.
Yeah, the run for re-election that was supposed to not happen, is that accurate?
Are you suggesting that one should be held to the promise of being
term limiting
himself?
Well, I mean, since he ran on it, perhaps, but I mean, it's. I don't want to fall into the trap of using Republicans' words and purported truths against them because they lie with impunity, and it doesn't seem to have any consequences.
To be fair, you can find new information once you become a senator. You might find that, like, oh, wait a second, it makes sense to me now that I should have two terms.
Yeah, it impassions me to remain in office and continue to advocate for the fewest federal holidays possible because we've got to keep our workers in line.
Yeah, indeed. And the idea of celebrating slavery ending, why would we?
Yeah, I don't even see the significance of that. That doesn't shock me.
Ron Johnson, there he is. And hopefully, yes, that will dog him for quite some time. But apparently he decided to give up the ghost on that. I'm not exactly sure what it was that convinced him over the past year. Maybe slavery just seemed a little bit worse this year. And a little more reason
Maybe he went to a museum like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
That's right. That's right.
She figured out the Holocaust was bad, and he figured out slavery was bad. It's a year of education.
Good week for Republicans in that regard. Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to Stephen Wertheim. He has written a piece about, and this was obviously in the wake of Joe Biden's trip to Europe, meeting with the G7. He met with, had a summit with Putin as well. And important idea about, the efficacy and the value of NATO in this day and age. We're going to take a quick break. Emma's going to step out for a bit, and you'll be back for the fun half.
Will do.
All right, great. Quick break, and we'll be right back with Stephen Wertheim. Folks, today's show is sponsored, at least in part, by fastgrowingtrees.com. This is a product. This is another one of those products, frankly, that I was using prior to them becoming advertisers, and I'm super happy about it because I'm actually getting fruit. It's bearing fruit, if you will, this relationship. So here's the deal. Folks who have listened to this show for a long time know that I do a little fruit tree planting.
Yeah.
And
the bearing fruit. I get it now.
There you go. I planted a couple of Korean pear trees. They look like massive apples when you get them. I put them in the ground. More or less, I would say in spring of last year. And they have at least a dozen fruits on both of them, and we had a good spring this year. It got warm early, and then there was no freeze. And this is what fast-growing trees are about. They send much hardier and larger trees than your average nursery. And so they start paying off much quicker. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going out and selling the Korean. I'm just saying, like, you want them to bear fruit. Mm-hmm. You can skip the big box stores. You head to fastgrowingtrees.com. They are the world's largest online nursery. Incidentally, I don't know what, you go to those box stores, you're not getting a Korean pear tree. You're just not going to find one there. You're going to find some very basic trees that are not necessarily cared for that well. The best way to buy trees, shrubs, and plants for your home and yard, it's fastgrowingtrees.com. You don't have to wait in lines. You don't get your car messed up. You don't have to dig through a lackluster selection. You just go to fastgrowingtrees.com. You choose from thousands of varieties of trees, shrubs, and plants, expertly curated to thrive in your area and delivered to your door in just 1 or 2 days. You can look for shade or privacy or fruit trees like I have, or you just add some color for your yard. I got 2 bloomerangs, and these are lilacs that bloom twice.
Aww.
So they already did once. I got the purple, and they're going to come back around. Again, tree I planted last year. Planting season is here. You can join over 1 million satisfied gardeners at fastgrowingtrees.com. Plus, the 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee means your plants will arrive happy, healthy, and ready for planting. Now through July 31st, you go to fastgrowingtrees.com/majority. You get 15% off. That's 15% off. fastgrowingtrees.com/majority. fastgrowingtrees.com/majority. You will be happy you did. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Stephen Wertheim, director of the Quincy Institute's Grand Strategy Program. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the Zoom, I guess. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program Stephen Wertheim. He is the director of Grand Strategy at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, also visiting faculty fellow at the Center for Global Legal Challenges at Yale Law School, a historian and author of Tomorrow the World, The Birth of U.S. Global Supremacy. Stephen, thank you for your time. You sound very busy, but appreciate your being.
It only sounds that way.
So we're talking in the wake of Joe Biden's trip to Europe for both to meet with NATO and to have a summit with Vladimir Putin. And this is also in the wake of a piece that you wrote for the New York Times. Sorry, liberals, but you really shouldn't love NATO. Let's start there. Let's just start, I mean, if you will, with a sort of a brief overview of what the purpose of NATO was, ostensibly, because on some level, NATO now, and I think this is part of your argument, feels like a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, or that is searching for a problem in some respects.
It has been openly searching for that problem for about 3 decades. So originally, NATO had a very clear purpose. It was created early in the Cold War to deter the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had the Red Army stationed in Eastern Europe. It then created the Warsaw Pact, its own military alliance, and NATO was the counterweight. And the beauty of NATO for many decades was that it did nothing. It sat there with a credible deterrent And the Soviet Union did not, in fact, mount an attempt to overrun Europe. And eventually the Soviet Union collapsed. So if you stop history in 1991, the point at which the Soviet Union dissolves, then I have to say, you know, you can debate whether NATO was exactly the right instrument to create. You can have lots of debates, but essentially NATO fulfilled its mission, was extremely successful in doing so, and I don't have any fundamental problem with NATO or US membership in NATO to that point. The issue comes after the collapse of the Soviet Union. At that time, the United States might have decided that in the absence of credible threats to the United States and to core US interests and partners, the United States could have pulled back militarily. That might have meant revamping NATO, might have meant scrapping NATO. My choice would have been to encourage the Europeans to create a new structure for cooperation, which actually the Europeans did. It's called the European Union. It just doesn't handle military affairs. That's what NATO does. So, but the United States suppressed European initiatives to provide for the defense of Europe from 1991 to the present. Instead, the United States wanted itself to be the dominant element in European security. And so not only did the United States remain in NATO, but it advocated, as did other members of NATO, the expansion of NATO, first in 1999, and then with many rounds thereafter.
Well, before we get into the series of attempts to expand, I mean, was there any concerted push by any NATO members in Europe to say, hey, okay, now we're done with this? Or was there a sense of like, we've got somebody sort of paying our bills on some level, and maybe we're getting a certain amount of economic activity associated with the bases that the Americans have here? Like, what was, you know, I can understand America's, that, or at least, I don't know if understand is the right word, but I'm aware that, you know, the United States, that our establishment felt like, well, we still want a hand in this. But what was the European disposition towards NATO at that point? Did they sort of feel like we don't need this anymore, or was it just we're getting a freebie?
I think it was more the latter. You know, why oppose a U.S. security guarantee? And not only that, you know, what were the harms? What were the risks? This is one of the problems, I think, both for Europe and for the United States in the 1990s. Russia was flat on its back. It did not have an easy transition to a post-Soviet democracy or even a thriving post-Soviet economy. And so even though Russia, now you might consider Russia to be in Europe. So if Russia's European, then Russia certainly preferred a different structure where at a minimum, NATO would not be expanded beyond a reincorporated Germany, but preferably Russia would be part of European security arrangements. And there was actually consideration of something like this in the early years of the Clinton administration, called a Partnership for Peace, in which, you know, NATO could incorporate Russia and other Russian-aligned nations into a wider structure. But and so actually the U.S. Pentagon was relatively skeptical early on, talking 93, that the United States should commit itself to the defense of an enlarged NATO, looking ahead, because the Pentagon, you know, is actually tasked with providing deterrence and with having to fight a war. But that skepticism was quickly eclipsed. It was eclipsed by about 1994 in the Clinton administration. And yet through the 1990s, as I point out in the op-ed that I wrote, there was still a healthy debate about NATO and the US role in NATO in the United States. In the first round of enlargement, the Senate took a vote in 1998, and 10 Democrats voted against the first round of enlargement to 3 countries, and 9 Republicans joined them. If you flash forward to the present, there are basically unanimous votes in the Senate to admit that the last 2 NATO members are North Macedonia and Montenegro. These countries were admitted under the Trump administration. No opponent of NATO, Donald Trump, that is a misnomer. Right. So there's been actually a narrowing of political debate in the United States on the specific question of NATO over time, even as the costs and the risks of the United States remaining the paramount guarantor of security in Europe have become more apparent.
I also remember in the early 90s, the talk of the peace dividend. I mean, this was going to be huge. And it felt like it never materialized. And I wonder how much of that talk of the peace dividend was perceived as a threat to the interests of those institutions and entities that make their money from there not being a sort of a comfortable peace, right? Like, because the peace dividend was like theoretically, like, we're not going to have to spend as much money on tanks and planes and this and that because we don't have the threat that was inherent in the Cold War. And somebody must have said, like, hey, wait a second, we're the ones selling the tanks or the planes. So that peace dividend, that might not work out so well. I mean, how much did that have to do with it? Because by the late 90s, you didn't hear much about the peace dividend anymore.
No, the late 90s was the unipolar moment, and we were off to the races with neoconservatives and liberal interventionists on the ascent. And that's very important for understanding the US reaction to 9/11. But yeah, the peace dividend was something that both George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton promised to deliver in the race for president in 1992. One of the problems was that the United States could still cut defense spending through the 90s as a percentage of GDP. So there was a kind of peace dividend relative to the previous era of the Cold War, and yet it could emerge more powerful relative to others than ever by the end of that decade, not because of us, but because of the fact that China was still quite poor. Russia was struggling to rebound from the collapse of the Soviet Union. So it was a have your cake and eat it too moment and perhaps decade. And I think that also in turn, obviously left the military industrial complex intact and created some dangerous assumptions that the United States can kind of act however it likes around the world that are still with us.
Right. And certainly the number of bases we had in 1991 was certainly, well, I should say, we didn't have any less. We don't have any less today than we had then. I think we probably have, I don't know, 20 or 30 more, if I remember correctly, maybe even more than that from 91. So, all right. So we started to see there was a hesitancy, at least, a quarter of the Senate nearly was against the idea of expansion. Remind us what those arguments were, and in many respects, they were fairly prophetic.
That's right. So let's take the liberal Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone, who voted against the first Iraq War in 1991, and then cast a vote against the second Iraq War that vote held in 2002. Well, in between, he also had to vote on the first round of NATO enlargement that extended the security guarantee of NATO to 3 countries. And he made the argument that, look, we should accept a good thing. Europe is whole and free. Europe is not divided anymore. And his concern was that reviving and expanding a military alliance in Europe would lead Europe to be redivided by poisoning relations with Russia, because Russia could not really do other than see the expansion of the NATO military alliance as adversarial towards Russia. This is an alliance that has its entire history consisting of pointing weapons at Moscow. But I think everybody kind of understood that Russia would be antagonized. But even on the other side, who really cared? What was Russia going to do about any of this at that point? And also, nobody knew at that time exactly how far NATO enlargement would go. So I think Wellstone and other critics had a very important insight, but it was one that didn't pack the potency at the time that it would have needed to break through the inertia of the status quo, to override the argument that through NATO admission, that would help to stabilize and democratize the former Warsaw Pact and Soviet states in Eastern Europe, because there are admission standards to NATO. So there were some short-term apparent benefits and long-term costs. And guess what? We went for the short-term benefits.
That is shocking. So what were, I mean, I understand. So the concept is, to be part of NATO, you need to have a certain amount of democracy for shorthand. And theoretically, that's going to create more stability down the road. And the argument that, hey, this may antagonize Russia was like, well, yeah, so what? I mean, what are they going to do about it? That doesn't make any difference to us. But what was the purported, like, what was the idea that we're going to get more stability? I mean, what was the really the impetus behind it there? I mean, that's I get the idea that, like, this is going to help democratize other places, but there would have been other ways to do that, it seems to me. And if you have stability, I don't know how you think you're going to get what you're going to get from more stability. Were there certain, like, markets reforms that were necessary to become part of NATO, that maybe there was moneyed interests that were, sort of driving this? Or
yeah, so you're right that there were other mechanisms to achieve reforms, liberal reforms, market reforms in the new states that NATO ended up incorporating. EU admission also was on the table, and recent research by Paul Post and Alexandra Chinchilla, 2 political scientists, has found that the EU standards better explain transitions to liberal democracy in Eastern Europe than does NATO membership, which makes sense because NATO is a military alliance. We have to insist that NATO is not some catch-all scheme for general international cooperation. An alliance is an alliance. It is a military alliance. That's serious business, but it's no more than that. It's no less than that. Where we today have this discourse where alliances seem to be conflated with friendships, partnerships, collaborative relationships. It's just not so.
All right. And so, okay. So we, NATO starts to expand, and the expansion becomes more and more threatening to Russia. And so we're on this sort of like track to expand, or NATO is to expand and become more of a threat to Russia. And meanwhile, I mean, Russia, the implications of that also change, right? I mean, on the Russian end. So take us through that. I mean, you know, when we're in the aughts in particular, and we should also say this is like the ascendance of the neocons, and talk about the implications of that as well.
Yeah, I do grand strategy, and so I like to think about, you know, Europe policy in conjunction with the rest of American foreign policy, and it's important to do that. So NATO, the attraction of NATO for American leaders was that, you know, it was going to build on the success of America's post-war leadership of the world. They thought, you know, in 1919, things went haywire because the United States retreated to so-called isolationism. In 1945, we got it right and committed the United States to playing the dominant role politically and militarily around the globe. And so in this new moment of the recasting of the world after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the same formula was required, even though the circumstances were extremely different. So that provided a real ballast to that view. And that's what starts to also inform the expansion of NATO to more and more members. And so in 2004, the Baltic states were admitted to NATO, as well as a handful of other former Soviet bloc states. The Baltic states are on, two of them on Russia's border. This is happening under the George W. Bush administration, you know, in the aftermath of 9/11, and while the war in Iraq is going on. It's the same people who think that this is a good idea, right? And it's a lot of the same logic that we see applied toward the Middle East and toward Europe, which is the United States will pursue its interests, its power position, and stand up for democracy and human rights by partnering with, you know, half of the region, in fact, allying with it militarily, and leaving the other half in the position of being real or potential enemies. The consequences in the Middle East, we know that story. In Europe, the consequences have been much more benign because Europe is a stable, prosperous region. And it's really, at the end of the day, only Russia that sees NATO as a threat. But now we've gotten to the point where after 2008, NATO declared, again with strong US support, that Ukraine and Georgia would be admitted into the accession process to NATO. And that was a real red line for Russia. And that is part of the causal context for Russia undertaking military occupations in parts of Georgia, and for after a pro-Russian leader was overthrown in Ukraine, for annexing Crimea, where there's a key naval base that allows Russia access to the Black Sea, and supporting separatists in the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine. So now we've seen actual conflict result. The other expansions of NATO didn't have that effect, even though Russian leaders and elites, not just Putin or anything, it's, you know, Russian elites consistently warned, this is setting us up for trouble. And we don't believe you when you say that the military alliance that is expanding right to our doorstep is somehow not aimed at us. But now we've come to a point where it's very hard to see how NATO could possibly expand further without doing great damage. And the question of membership for Ukraine is still on the table. It was discussed at the NATO summit last week, but I don't think it's going to happen, given that Germany and France quite reasonably oppose extending a NATO membership to Ukraine. The US position is actually a little more moderate, even though it would be the United States. Presumably that would take the lead if it came to a war with Russia in Ukraine. But I think even having the door open to Ukraine creates negative effects. It creates a false hope among Ukrainian leadership that if they go to war, perhaps they will have the United States military and that of the other NATO allies to back them up. And that can incentivize reckless behavior on their part, leading them to take risks that they otherwise wouldn't take, given that if it comes to a war just between Russia and Ukraine, it's pretty hard to see how Russia wouldn't win.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I wanna just sort of put a flag in to the question of how could we or NATO have messed up so badly as to sort of ostensibly try and avoid a conflict and do the very thing that would promote a conflict. I want to circle back to that. But first, like the idea back in, in 2008, because I remember, John McCain in particular was very, very interested in this expansion of NATO. He was very intimately involved in the neocon project. I mean, people forget that as late as 2000, maybe it was 7, I think he was saying, like, how long can we stay in Iraq? I don't know. How long have we stayed in Germany? I mean, he was basically saying we can have an open-ended occupation. It's not a problem. How much, during this era, and by this era, I mean really from early 90s into the, the end of the aughts, as it were, of the 2000s, was there any sort of cohesive counterbalance to the neocon vision that was outlined in the Project of New America Century, which was essentially the U.S. is going to be a hyperpower. And our job is we're going to maintain a Pax Americana around the world. There'll be tiny little conflicts, but those tiny little conflicts around the world will actually serve to maintain our hyperpower status by not allowing any sort of cohesive challenge to our power to emerge. And, ultimately maybe China, there was an underestimation of what would happen with China's economy. But there was a disregard for just Russia, period. But was there any counterbalance to that? Because it doesn't feel like there was any sort of cohesive ideology or vision for something other than America as a hyperpower.
Yeah, I wish I could say yes. I suspect the answer is no, although maybe I need to write a book on this. I think if there was an intellectually cohesive comeback, it was largely confined to academia. In the 1990s, some academics come up with a grand strategy of restraint, given that the United States doesn't face major threats anymore. Their view is, why make costly commitments or commitments that at best will lead the United States to spend more on defense and at worst can actually lead us into conflict in the future. So they sketch that out, but it's pretty much confined to academia. There are some couple think tankers in Washington. The Cato Institute, the Libertarian Cato Institute, was really first into a grand strategy of restraint. At moments, people of this disposition spoke out. There was an open letter opposing the Iraq War with some people from the restraint camp and others who saw it as a terrible idea for other reasons. It's not like those people, having been proved right, gained power and influence in Washington, D.C. Quite the contrary. So I think for 2 decades, the 2 decades you've mentioned, pretty much there was a debate between one flavor of U.S. military primacy and another flavor of U.S. military primacy. And I think we're just breaking out of the confines of that debate.
It certainly feels that way. And that explains why you could go from, in the late 90s, 10 senators voting against the expansion of NATO. And by the time you get to 2010, there's nobody. It's a foregone conclusion. Why wouldn't we? And so where are we now in terms of, like, you know, the United States? There's less of we've moderated in terms of, like, we're starting to put the brakes on because we see that what many people predicted was that this is actually the expansion of NATO is not going to stabilize anything. It is going to it's going to be a destabilizing force. What is the next step that we should take? I mean, you suggest that we should probably allow NATO to be more just European and let the dust settle on some level.
Yeah, and let me say, the effects of NATO were arguably stabilizing for several decades. It's just that they didn't yet impinge on vital Russian interests until they did, right? And now where do we go? So I think it would be quite risky for the United States to remain the leading provider of European security. And for the life of me, even if you think NATO has a vital role to play, I do not know why it could be that states like France, Germany, the UK cannot defend themselves and defend Europe. It just beggars belief why they can't do that. They can. But why would they? If the United States says, hey, you can keep your defense spending pretty low, we'll take care of it.
Right. And the fact that NATO has sort of outlived its purpose within the context of Europe is manifested in its sort of now looking beyond the horizon. Just talk about that, because it's now, this is where we get into, a solution without a problem. And it's just sort of like looking around, where can I be relevant here? And presumably this is, what's driving that? Is that the United States driving that? Or is it just, the military industrial complex driving that? Like, we need to make NATO relevant because we're selling too much to let this market dry up.
Yeah, from the 1990s to the present, leading figures have said NATO needs to go out of area or out of business, recognizing that it was unclear exactly what the purpose of this great military alliance was. So what NATO did was go out of area, and that meant assisting the United States in military operations in the greater Middle East. Well, first there were the interventions in Bosnia and Kosovo in the 1990s. That's not so out of area, but then NATO forces fought alongside Americans for 20 years in Afghanistan. They're now being withdrawn. NATO also was the key institution that undertook the intervention in Libya, which the British and the French were particularly keen on, and the United States under Obama supported. And part of the motive, fundamentally, the endless wars in the Middle East were the result of US foreign policy failures. It's not like NATO somehow dragged the US into it. That's not the case. But NATO has provided some legitimacy and support. And part of the incentive, I think, for the European members of NATO is hey, if we can go out of area and show the United States that we support its ambitions around the world, then the United States will be happy about this and remain committed to its leadership role in Europe. And now we've come to a new phase in the out of area ambitions of NATO, because in last week's summit, the most significant news was that NATO contained a lot of language about China in its official communique, casting China as an important challenger to the so-called rules-based international order. And so, you might ask, what does NATO have to do with China? NATO's a military alliance centered in Europe. China is in China. The Chinese military is not distributed around the globe with a network of military alliances and bases. And I'm skeptical that there is a hell of a lot for NATO Europe to do with respect to China, but it seems to be, I actually do think Europe could play a useful role in trying to calm down the United States and not go overboard in its great power competition with Russia and China. That's useful, but it's not necessary or I think even beneficial for Europe to play that role through a US-led NATO forum. Better for Europe to take its destiny into its hands, as Angela Merkel said several years ago after Trump's election, actually create a Europe-led and owned security arrangement in Europe, focus on defending Europe, not making small contributions to US efforts elsewhere. And even if you're a China hawk, that's actually better for that agenda, because it frees up the United States to focus on counterbalancing China in East Asia. Or if you're not a China hawk, it frees up the United States to send troops home and invest more in its own people.
It feels like what NATO does now is it enables the United States to make these decisions. This is the thing I think that you mentioned Ukraine's decision-making process is influenced by the perception that NATO may back it, and therefore it will be riskier and be more prone to engage in conflict. The same the dynamics not exactly the same. Well, the dynamic seems similar. The United States feels more comfortable entering into conflict Y or X because NATO is joining it. It provides just a little bit. It's maybe anywhere from greasing the wheels to pushing the cart a little bit there. And so, is there any discernible political base or faction to do what you say in that regard? Because it does feel like the idea that NATO needs to exist to protect Europe from China just seems nonsensical. And even the construct of like they are a threat to the rules-based structure of the world. I don't know what that really. I'm sure it means something, but it sounds like it's made up a little bit.
Don't be sure that it means something.
That's what I mean. It just sounds like we need to figure out like where they're not behaving politely in other social circumstances, and we just need to be around to remind them or something.
I have plenty of problems with Chinese activities, but to say that they're a threat to some rules-based order, I do have a problem with that. This rules-based order is actually a pretty recent phrase. It is, I think, impossible to define. So, and most importantly, in a practical sense, it is a way of saying China's a threat to us without actually specifying what that threat is, creating this fear that doesn't otherwise need to be there.
Right.
So it is pretty dangerous, I think.
All right. So, but is there any will?
Oh yeah. Okay. You asked me a question. I forgot the question. So, I think that Donald Trump did kind of stir up some critical thinking on the conservative side about alliances. I don't know that it really was a net positive. First of all, I think that's part of the reason why on the left, there is this protection of alliances and moralization of alliances, because it seems like Donald Trump was opposed to them. I think there's just a misunderstanding there, because Trump did not, in fact, oppose any alliances as president. He allowed the alliances to grow. And I think what a lot of people on the left really mean is that they want to be part of the world. They want to cooperate. They want to tackle common challenges. And there's a confusion as to whether alliances are really part of cooperation. So I am hoping that people will think more critically about NATO wherever they fall on the issue at the end of the day, that if we see it for what it is, a military alliance that, like any other military alliance, can, yes, it might deter bad behavior, but it also risks war. I think we'll be in a much healthier place. So there are some stirrings of at least criticism on the Republican side. I think if progressives and Democrats think about what they already believe, a lot of them already believe about American foreign policy, that we should end endless war and prevent new ones, that we should play a smaller military role in the 21st century world, that we should reduce our defense spending and make better investments here at home and focus on the real international challenges that affect Americans where they live and work, like climate change, like pandemic disease. If you have those commitments, I merely ask, connect the dots to the US dominated military alliance of NATO.
And what about within the Europeans in NATO? Are they becoming more skeptical in any respect, or is that just sort of like inviting a huge cost that they don't necessarily want to pick up?
Both at once. There are increasing discussions in European capitals of what they call strategic autonomy. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, has been at the forefront of these discussions. He even called several years ago for the formation of a European army that would be under the auspices of the European Union and therefore independent of the United States. How much support there really is for this in Europe remains to be seen. I think that the Biden administration, with its reassurances that America's back, that it regards the collective security provision of NATO as a sacred obligation, as the president has repeated many times, that may paper over these European stirrings for more autonomy. But over the longer term, I think they will continue, and they might even continue in parallel with the Biden administration's reassurances about the U.S. commitment to NATO, since there's a lot of uncertainty about who the next president will be and what the future of the American political system is, and because Europeans really don't want to be conscripted into a U.S. effort to make the world choose between engaging economically with China and engaging economically with the United States. Same with the choice between Russia and the United States. So I think that a lot of Europeans are appreciating that there are some divergences between where Europe wants to go and where America wants to go. So I'm, interested. I don't know about optimistic, but I'm interested in how the thinking across the Atlantic shapes up in the short term and especially in the longer term.
All right, one last question, and this is a little bit devil's advocate here. Is there any, I mean, let's assume we have a world where NATO does not expand, where at least its posture looks a little bit more inward and just says, we're just going to be defensive. We don't necessarily need to bring, other countries. We don't need to stabilize other countries in this manner. We can do it through maybe admission to the EU or some other, alliance. Does the idea that there is no standing European army, in some respects, ratchet down a threat? In other words, would having a standing European army that's just sitting around with nothing to do represent maybe to Russia, let's say, maybe perhaps more of a potential threat than the idea that, well, the United States is across the Atlantic. There's, they don't have any necessarily, the idea that the U.S. is going to fight on behalf of Ukraine is a hard sell in the United States, might not be as hard of a sell in, some European countries. Is there any merit to that idea?
That's a very serious point. It's not like, look, security is difficult. There are always going to be risks in any context. So there could be risks that, if the Europeans seem particularly aggressive toward Russia, that, things could go worse for Europe than what we have now. But that's unlikely to be the case, I think. It's the major powers of Europe, Germany and France, that are clearly opposed to, for example, extending NATO membership to Ukraine, whereas the United States has been more assertive in that regard. So I actually worry that it's the faraway United States that seems more concerned about threats to Europe that affect Europe more than they affect us, right? Threats from Russia. So I think in the long run, it'd be better for Europe's security, but one never knows exactly. And, yes, Emmanuel Macron may be interested in European strategic autonomy. He was also perhaps interested in doing more militarily in Africa to fight terrorism. Those are not, necessarily good things, but that is part of allowing others to step up in the world and make some decisions for themselves. A huge beneficiary of the U.S. stepping back from Europe will be the United States. Europe is capable of defending Europe. They may make mistakes, but if they make mistakes and the United States has to get more involved militarily, we will have at least given things a shot, and we can feel confident that our security is extremely significant given where the United States is located. We don't have to put ourselves on the front lines of every existing conflict and of any future conflict. I don't think that the American people really want to spend the rest of the 20th century in armed conflicts or standoffs that risk World War III with Russia or China or others.
Stephen Wertheim, the book is Tomorrow the World, The Birth of a U.S. Global Supremacy, and Director of Grand Strategy at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
And that's stuff to think about in terms of NATO. Alliances can sometimes lose their point, and I think then they start working against their point in the first place. So there's that. Now, Emma, we have Fun Half could be super fun today.
It could be, yeah.
And we're going to have to take a break, and we're actually probably going to end the stream. But we're going to say goodbye to our Peacock viewers. And we will be back tomorrow. You can watch this show on Peacock 10 p.m. every day, and watch our other Peacock show every day at 5 p.m. And it's also on demand. So for you Peacock viewers, we will see you tomorrow. For you non-Peacock viewers who have the ability to watch the fun half, I think we might have something interesting to talk about at the fun half today. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be, but we might have something very, very fun to tease, to talk about, whatever
Fingers
it is.
crossed.
We'll see. But we can't know right now, but we will know, oddly, in the fun half. And we will explain in the fun half how it is that we can't even tell you whether we're going to have something interesting to talk about in 30 seconds when the fun half happens shortly after this. So
it's just like incredibly mysterious, but
it's very mysterious. It has to do with the time-space continuum. And, well, when we come back, it's going to be much later than it is now.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danarchy's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danarchy.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bang. A hell of a lot of bang. A hell of a lot of bang. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bang. A hell of a lot of bang. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Back, ladies and gentlemen. I think our picture should be improved by now.
Yes.
So, folks, this is the fun half of the program. And for those of you who may be watching this show for the first time, Generally, what we do is we do a show from 12 to 1 every day.
Eastern.
That is the free half of the show. And we feature often a long-form interview. Sometimes Em and I will run through the news. And very rarely, when we go on vacation, we will pre-tape. Let me read this IM to enter into some explanations for you, because I think some explanations are due you, the audience. This is an IM that we got almost at the beginning of the show. And it's from a guy named Chowder with Crowder, which is fortuitous. Stream resolution kind of fucked up, Sam. You're being squished horizontally, but only the camera feed logo appears normal. And that is correct. That was a correct assessment of what was going on. And the question was, why?
Well, it was to make you look skinnier. And me, incidentally.
That is one of the answers. The other answer, I should also say, has to do with, you will look at my Zoom feed today, and you will notice that my name, you got Emma Vigeland there in the right-hand corner of your, the left-hand corner of your frame. But for me today, I don't have Sam Seder. I have a smiley face. All of these things have to do with each other. Everything, in fact, that we have talked about since the beginning of the show, including the IM, has to do with each other. Let's go back a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe it was 4 weeks ago, I can't remember. I got an IM, I got tweeted at, Sam, you got name checked on H3. And I was like, H3? I think that's it's a big YouTube show, but I was like, what?
Yeah.
And so I went to check it out, and it is hosted by this guy Ethan Klein, who I may know some people who know him in the comedy world. He's out in LA, but and he looked familiar to me. But that's probably because he looks like family members or whatever. And I was like, what's this about? And it turns out they were talking about Steven Crowder. And Steven Crowder and Ethan were having some type of back and forth. And I didn't know the details of it at the time, but their producer, Dan, at the end of the segment, turns to the camera and says, this is the only time I'm going to have to address Crowder, because I know he's going to watch this. And I remember thinking well, yeah, this is a big, big channel, I guess. But I mean, is Crowder really that thin-skinned that he's going to tune in to every time his name is mentioned on a show? I mean, anyways, Dan looks at the camera and says, hey, debate Sam Seder. And he goes on about telling the story about the Politicon. Folks can go back and look for the video that we did when I played the audio of the Politicon booker calling me and telling me that Crowder had dropped out. And
cold feet, in fact.
He said that was her words, that he got cold feet because his team pulled him out, and his team is his dad, apparently. And I'd also been invited on the Gavin McInnes show. I didn't want to go on there, but they offered up, we got Crowder to debate, and then Gavin wrote me back and said, no, Crowder's doesn't want to debate you, whatever. And I'm like, all right, whatever. And so that's why Dan had said this. And I thought, oh, that's great. We played the clip of it. That was really nice to get that shout out.
Big podcast, big show.
Big show, big podcast. And then I get a DM from Ethan, a week later or something like that. And he says, hey, Steven Crowder wants to debate me. And he's like, I don't do a political show. He's like, I think you should come on and debate him as I'm, on with him. And I was like, I would love to do that. Thank you. And so last week, you'll recall, last Monday, they were scheduled to have a debate at 1 p.m. Eastern, which is 10 a.m., I think it was Pacific. And so you'll recall last week we started the show early. And here is where I need to make an apology to the audience. I implied that the reason why we were doing that was because I was recording the Bob's Burgers movie.
Hey, I would not say you implied it. In fact, you tweeted about it later. So
well, if you look at
it was
that
a white
tweet,
lie.
if you look at that tweet, Emma, I did not say.
Oh, the lawyering, Jesus.
Well, if you look at the tweet, bring it up. Can we bring this up, Brendan? Can you find it? On that tweet, I did not say I ended the show early because I am recording Hugo for Bob's Burgers for the movie. Instead, I tweeted, and Brendan, do you have this? Okay. It is, I tweeted, let me see if I can pull it up here on my own. I tweeted instead, sorry about the show being early, ending the show early today. Huever, the good news is I can tell you that I recorded that Hugo's on Bob's Burgers. Now, all of that is true. Yeah, here it is. Apologies for the early start today for Majority.fm. ... Second thought, happens to be unrelated.
Yeah.
But was in the same tweet. I can, however, happily report that Hugo will make a cameo in the Bob's Burgers movie. Now, the fact is that no, I had recorded that a couple days earlier. What? But why, Sam, would you tweet that? Well, we started the show early. We ended at 12:30 p.m., which was 30 minutes before the debate that
11
Crowder,
to 12:30.
Yeah,
if you guys remember
that Crowder had planned with Ethan Klein on H3, and so we connect with H3 through Zoom, and like immediately after we're done with the show, and then 4 or 5 minutes later, they go, "Oh, we just got an email from Crowder's dad that Stephen had an emergency with his wife who's pregnant." And this is actually sort of disturbing.
We were concerned.
We were concerned. And I'm being serious about that, actually. And he can't do it. However, we will reschedule for next Monday at noon. And Ethan says they knew that you were getting off your show early, and they're afraid that you're going to be debating him. And I got to say that I was like,
come on, Ethan.
I don't think I said that to him because I was like, I didn't want to be, rude, but I was like, I'm not sure about that. Like, would he really pretend that his wife, who's pregnant with 2 kids, is in jeopardy? And would he really be monitoring when our show is off the air? That's absurd. That's absurd that he would do that. I mean, how afraid would he have to be? How paranoid would he have to be that he's engaged with a debate with somebody else? Like, I'm just trying to put my mind in the same mind frame. Like, I've got a debate scheduled with Tim Pool, and I'm like, I'm going to monitor the show of Dave Rubin to see that he hasn't changed his live show, because what if Dave Rubin comes on when I thought I was going to debate Tim Pool?
I mean, that would probably be like the equivalent of Christmas for you.
That would be, yeah.
Or Hanukkah.
It would actually, I think it's actually, there's no
equivalent.
There is no equivalent. It would be
a birth of another child.
But I'm trying to put my head into that mind. Like, how afraid would I have to be that paranoid about it? And so I found it really hard to believe. But it was weird that, hey, we have an emergency. I mean, this is the grandfather of those kids. If I was that guy, I would be like, look, we have an emergency, can't get back to you. I wouldn't give the details, because why would I? And I'm like, it's an emergency, and I'll get back to you later in the week to reschedule. But no, they reschedule it for 12 p.m. on Monday, Eastern, which is exactly when we go live.
That's so weird.
But I told this to other friends, friends who are not in this world. And they're like, dude, do you think that he's really that afraid of just debating you? Like, it's not in person. It's not like you're some type of assassin. I said, even if I was, he carries a gun. He has a holster that he wears all the time with a gun.
It's his costume.
Yeah. I mean, his costume is ready to defend himself too.
Normalizing it, yeah.
But I was like, but Ethan thought that, and he's a pretty savvy guy when it comes to YouTube stuff and these guys.
Yeah.
And So I was like, all right, let's pre-tape the show. And I pre-taped the interview last week with Stephen Wertheim. Great interview.
Yeah. That's why I had to step out.
Yeah. Well, if people watched the show today, they noticed also that we were stretched. And that is because we're back in the studio and we haven't quite set up our system to do the show and to output it. And so we were just like, oh, fuck it. Let's just run it. And so we pre-recorded the intro and the outro to make it for today at like 10:30.
You coordinated your shirts very effectively.
And Emma kept reminding me, and that's why I was like surprised.
I was like, make sure you wear the same shirt each time. Yes.
And then Matt was furiously trying to stitch it together so that we could turn it around in time. And we connected with Ethan's show, H3, via Zoom. And that's why I have in my logo in the left.
You're right.
Right there is a smiley face because I wasn't sure how we were doing this. And I know that when we're bringing somebody onto our Zoom, you see their name first and their audio is connecting. And I'm like, just in case, Crowder. And let's go around the room right now. Brendan, I want you to participate in this. Well, wait a second. Let me just pull it up. And so we connect with Ethan and he says, look, guys, Dan, our brilliant technology guy, has figured out like it's going to be Crowder's Zoom. So you're not going to come onto the Zoom. We're going to be able to just feed you in to the Zoom. And so we're sitting here. I think I shot like a video during it. We're just waiting and watching the IMs with the ratio is messed up. And I'm like, yeah, people are going to be.
I can't wait to see the videos I took, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And so we're waiting for this, and I can see what's going on there. And then at one point, they show Crowder's empty seat in his studio, and he's not coming on until 2 minutes after we launch our show. And we did it like a minute or two early, right? Yeah, we launched it around 11:58, just so that we could do this. And
yeah, the show actually started right on time today, which Crowder's people should have noticed something was up when that happened.
Well, I mean, that presumes that they were actually monitoring our show.
It does presume that.
It does presume that. We're going to end the story here, ladies and gentlemen. So I can tell you that I want, like, people can IM in what they think would happen. In fact, we should probably put up a poll. Poll. What did Crowder do and Ethan, like, I gotta say, Ethan is he's a genius at this. I mean, he just and I'm curious. Let's just go around the studio right now and guess what happened. And I will say this: no one here guessed what Crowder would or did not do that really was the icing on the cake.
Yes.
Right? Now, I don't want to give away anything. That's it. Yeah. Because Ethan is going to play this for his subscribers, I think, tonight as part of his show. I think they get early release, and then I think people can see it tomorrow after this show. I think it plays.
And we'll, of course, cover it once.
And then once, if anything happened or not, we will...
I mean, there's a chance that what happened was Crowder calmly dispatched you in an intellectual debate.
Well, let's go through the different scenarios. I mean, there's really only 3 scenarios. One is...
He hung up immediately.
Mm-hmm. The other is we engaged in a debate. He won, I won, it was a draw. One is that as soon as it happened, I had a heart attack. Obviously, I didn't, because I wouldn't have recovered this quickly. But maybe he had a heart attack. No one had a heart attack. It's really only those two things.
That's the only third option.
Well, there's a third option is that there was just like,
a lot of acrimony.
A lot of acrimony and finger pointing and hurt feelings.
From one end.
From any end, it could have happened. And we're all talking hypothetically now.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that if there was any type of situation, I went in unarmed. I am trying to normalize not wearing a holster on your YouTube show with a gun. Try to normalize that for YouTube hosts. But I do want to. All right, so let's just predictions go around. Emma, what was your guess as to what would happen?
My guess was
try and put yourself in there. Don't cheat.
Well, I was worried going in because he'd already gotten cold feet so many times, right? Hashtag cold feet Crowder. I was concerned that he would back out again and we would have had to come in.
Before the debate even happened with Ethan.
Yeah, I was worried that he would see maybe that there were some differences in the show since he's clear. Oh, well, yeah, right. I'm sorry about that. I thought that at the time going into the debate that it seemed like he was monitoring or whatever happened, the potential debate. It seemed like he might have been monitoring the show. So I thought that maybe he would just back out or immediately hang up. I'm not saying that didn't happen. And I'm not saying that it did happen.
Okay. Matt, do you want to?
Mine is the debate.
What is it?
That he beats you.
Okay. You should get on the mic and say that.
You're not on the mic.
I'll just, in the meantime, I'll read a couple IMs. Crowder, my border collie named Sam. Crowder claimed another emergency and ran out of the room to change his undies. Big Dick Cheney says Crowder bailed immediately, didn't he?
He did just tweet something.
He did?
About the...
Well, hold on. Let's get to that Twitter tweet in a second.
I don't quite get it.
Matt, what did you think your...
I thought, Crowder was going to win the debate so soundly that I wouldn't have a job on Tuesday.
That could have been a possibility. I could have gotten tranced in such a way that it was so or tranced. What am I? Trounced. Yes, thank you. He could have just I could have mispronounced something. He could have gone off on that for an extended period of time. There was so many ways in which he could have destroyed me. That's true, and that would maybe in some way hinder Matt's future on the show for all of us, really. Brendan, what was your what was your sense of what you would do?
Somewhere between what happened and,
Well, no, you can't say that because we're not.
What did I think? I think. Well, how can I give anything without revealing something that happened?
I'm saying, what was your mindset before the? All right, you're disqualified because now you've given a hint as to what happened. All right.
I don't know. No,
Okay.
I didn't.
I thought that if we were successful in jumping on that Zoom, that Crowder would just immediately cut the feed and go we're having technical problems. His producer would come back. We're having technical problems. We just had a power outage. That would involve really quick thinking. And I have to say this, and this is a little bit, I'm hesitant to say this because people can misinterpret this. Sam, you're so full of yourself. But that would have involved at least some that would assume that Crowder was nervous about something like this. It would assume that Crowder would be afraid to debate me if he actually did, as opposed to just being I'm not going to give that little dick the satisfaction of debating, that he would be genuinely, because he's not giving me the satisfaction in that scenario. He's actually being the bigger man, right? He's the one who's saying look.
Oh, he's very much concerned about being a bigger man.
Yes.
If
I am bushwhacked like that, the way for me to really show how much more powerful I am than the person who bushwhacks me is to say, okay, you've had your little fun. Now let's do this. I'm not inviting you on the show. I find this to be petty and silly, and it shows how juvenile you are, Sam. This is how I would have reacted. But you know what? You wanted to fight. You wanted to fight me in the arena of ideas, if you want to get into the ring, as it were, okay, you're here now, Sam, and now I'm going to pull you apart.
I feel confident because I have the truth on my side.
I have the truth. I have the intellect. I've been doing all these change my mind things. That's the way that I would have done it.
I have the moral upper hand in this situation.
Absolutely,
right.
because I was bushwhacked. I mean, that's what I would have done if I was Crowder. But I assumed what he would do is just like, at least be aware of like, look, if this goes sideways, guys, we're just pulling the plug. The Zoom connection's bad. We say our power went out. We're going to have to reschedule another time and we'll never get around to it, or we'll deal with that later. Okay. Certainly if Sam shows up on there or anybody, or if there's any, because Ethan had told us that Stephen's dad had written Ethan and said, no tricks, no hijinks.
No, right. No funny business.
No funny business. And so.
Which, I mean, it could have meant you, or it could have meant.
Anything.
But it definitely. Like a whoopee cushion or something.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Okay. Where we are now with the knowledge of what has happened, we don't know. So all that we know is Crowder canceled a week ago, ostensibly because there was a crisis with his pregnant wife.
But
he
minutes
rescheduled
after our stream ended.
Minutes after our stream ended. Could have been a coincidence. He rescheduled for 12 p.m. Eastern when we go live normally. Could have been a coincidence. And that's all we know.
Maybe we'll never know for sure.
Well,
wait,
no,
we have
we
an
might have a better sense.
We have
or
an
we may not.
From Binder, who just messaged us in the chat, says, tell Sam my guess is his dad physically pulled him off screen, a la pulling someone off stage with a cane. And then his dad said in person to the camera that Stephen had a sudden family emergency. But it sounds like he's playing, whatever the case may be, 978-degree chess.
Well,
that is what he just tweeted.
Yes. Now, Stephen Crowder has just tweeted out 978D chess. Now, I guess that's a way of mocking. I guess he just lost at 978-dimensional chess. He also lost at one-dimensional, or three-dimensional chess too. He lost in ways that if I was his dad, I would be very disappointed.
It's like, you think I lost this, but actually a really complicated game that nobody else understands shows that I actually won this.
That's right. Is that what he's? He could be arguing that he's actually playing a double-blind situation, right? Like where he actually is operating on such a higher level. That now. So look, folks, I would love to tell you more about the story, but we're going to have to wait for tomorrow, but I will read some IMs. But I just want to make it clear some major points here. They canceled minutes after we ended our stream last time, claimed that his wife had an emergency that they had to go to the hospital for. Honestly. And then came on to Ethan's show moments after we went live.
H3.
Yep, H3.
Just so people know.
Just so people know. And so, look, I want to apologize to our audience. I don't know that we told an outright lie, but we certainly obfuscated. How am I supposed to say this?
Obfuscate.
Obfuscated the truth. And for that, I apologize, but I think you'll find it worth it. That's all I can say. I mean, I don't know, but if I had to guess, I would say yeah.
Otherwise, you're very particular about aspect ratios, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. The Mars from in Chicago, the whole first half of the fun half was blue balls personified. I-5, I think Crowder went deadly pale, shat his pants, and then went, I'm driving through a tunnel. Rob from Dedham, Crowder's dad crawled out from under his desk and shouted, turn it off. Joe from Dayton, may I have a chauffeur for my mother, Christy, who just retired after decades of work as a special ed school psychologist. She worked with underprivileged and at-risk students her entire career. She went back to school when I was a baby to provide for her family while also helping those who needed the most support early in their education. Her work taught me early in life the importance of being kind to others. I love you, Mom. Absolutely. That's...
I'm reading Crowder's mentions right now.
It's getting a little bit rough.
Lots of gifs of you.
Is that the way we pronounce it? GIFs?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's get back to regular programming.
I mean, guys, we came in early on 2 Mondays.
Yeah.
For this.
And I gotta say,
I love. I mean,
I was gonna say, like, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I can tell you that for me, it was so worth it.
I've never seen you so happy.
Saul won a big baseball game yesterday.
Yeah.
Not him, his team. And but he did too. And so that is adding to like my my mood. But I gotta say, that was pretty gosh darn satisfying. Well, I'm not gonna comment on what happened anymore because you know, you got to check out Ethan's show, and then we'll play it obviously after that. Let's go to the phones. Call him from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Is the phone thing up? Do we have phone? Let's see. Hold on for 1 second, caller. Wait a second. Wait, output. Yeah, that should be there.
Hey, it's Kowalski.
Did you change something or did I? I did. Okay. Kowalski, what's happening? Kowalski? Maybe it's Kowalski. Yeah, what was that? Okay. Kowalski.
Okay, Kowalski.
Wait, now. Kowalski.
Yo.
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, I just felt like I had to call in and congratulate you on either defeating that nemesis or at least getting to die, you know, in the service of a greater cause.
Well, I appreciate that. We're going to have to wait a day or two to watch the actual footage, if there is any. But it'll be worth the wait.
I'm sure it will. I just wanted to say, regardless, either you probably destroyed him or at the very least he cowered in fear. Regardless, I don't see how this isn't going to be a win. So just congratulations and good. I'm excited to see this. I think everybody who's ever seen you debate is excited. So I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you, Kowalski.
Thanks, Kowalski.
All right. Let's take another phone call before we get into some of these clips. Calling from a 917 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
My name is Dan, calling from Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Dan
Hi,
from the
Dan.
Upper West Side of Manhattan. What's happening?
Hi, Sam. You know, we spoke, years ago. We talked about culture and the left. You might remember the call. And at that point, I had already been involved in activism and organizing and funding on the radical left for some time. In fact, I was the gentleman from New York who, years after the crash and bailouts, wrote Adbusters magazine in Vancouver, British Columbia, to start culture jamming New York City, which became Occupy, thanks to their hard work and the hard work of the people.
Wait a second. Did you write for Adbusters or did you start Adbusters?
No, I wrote to them and Kali Lazen, the founder and editor, and said, you know, you talk about culture jamming. The most obvious center that would need to be culture jammed right now, following, that was back in, I wrote them in 2010. So it had already been a couple years of really no resistance, no response, no American left organization taking on the power of the markets and providing an anti-capitalist alternative. And so I had to reach out to a tiny 10-person at the time anti-consumer magazine, Adbusters, from New York, and sort of nudged them into culture jamming. And I never took any credit. You won't find my name in any history by Todd Gitlin or Nathan Schneider or whoever wrote the histories on these things. But, it was important and somewhat spoiling in that it became, a fairly large thing. Obviously, Occupy, I think, provided a great opening for the left and a new narrative. I'm not sure whether Bernie runs would have happened without it, or AOC, or the new PSA. And so, I'm happy about it, but at the same time, it's been somewhat of a disappointment, this new left, I must say. So I don't really know where to start, except that I'm going to start with this. I went down to Wall Street again this last week, not to start a one-man army, but to protest the trillions of dollars that were just printed for the bankers and the stockholders and the rich and elite and powerful, while the poor, suffered and toiled and starved throughout COVID. So it was the greatest transfer upward of wealth in human history. And yet again, no organization on the left, the American left, or really the global left, has had any real response. And so once again, I'm down there alone so far, not trying to be, Greta Thunberg, but, working on my messaging and my guts and my voice, so that when folks do join me, and I hope they will, that's one of the reasons I'm calling you, I think it's time to create an Occupy that actually is better organized and better structured, because I think what happened with Occupy, as someone who was somewhat involved, is that we tried to go for this leaderless sort of pseudo-horizontalism, and instead we had a lot of sort of the louder or the more careerist voices. And this was something that, has been written about in the past. There's a famous essay called The Tyranny of Structurelessness by Jo Freeman. And she talks about this trend that the left was going into back in the 70s, away from organization, as if organization is a form of authority. And I think if anyone who actually has done the learning, which I'm not sure very many leftists have read Malatesta and sort of the importance of organization to fight authority, I think that was all backwards. And I think what's been lacking on the left is structural organizing. And what we do now is endless mobilizing, Sam. So we do events, we do protests and marches. Those are perfectly important, but those provide momentum and money for actual building and organizing on a permanent structural, process-driven educational organizing level. And we have not, I think we've lost the institutional memory almost. And I could go into, the nonprofitization of activism and sort of the careerism that it fosters. But I must say, when I look at this current left, I think we've completely replicated capitalism. And I don't think we can fight a good fight when we've created a left that is basically a little cottage industry, and a cottage industry in which fairly mediocre and medium-sized fish can become huge fish in a very, very tiny pond. And so I'm very worried about the sort of anti-capitalism that has been created, because to me it is careerism, credentialism. For instance, I couldn't get in touch with anyone after Occupy because I was unknown and no one would give me the time of day. In fact, I probably let my principle override practice and not sort of taking some little amount of credit for its inception. But I've run into this again and again, and I think that this left on the organizing and activist level in working with folks, it's not the same level of activism qualitatively. And I think we've created a sort of industry. The woman who was so radical that she took down a project that I was hoping to fund to get us back to building, used her community organizing to platform herself to Wharton, where she's now studying business ethics. I think that's what it's become. I think it's very scary. So I think that moving away from having the nonprofit industry subsume leftism and our activism is so crucial right now. And I'm going to try to start a movement where when money and momentum does, start happening or start coming in, that we start building, because I don't think there will be a revolution, Sam. I'm pretty certain at this point there's not going to be. I really think it's too late now to reform, I think, after COVID and Trump. So I think you have to plan rationally for some kind of collapse. And that's what I'm hoping, is that when things do start falling apart, that at least we have alternative, anti-capitalist, more ecocentric and humane and humanitarian, prefigurative alternatives to what we have now. And so if anyone would like to join me, I will be down at Wall Street. I'll have the Capitalism is Cancer sign and the This is a Death Cult sign on the other side. And I will be down there. I would be glad to chat with anybody. I would be glad to have anyone board. I'm not trying to be the face of anything.
Is there any other, how do you have any type of web page or something like that set up?
I do not yet. This was really, I'm just starting, as I said, this is not, me.
Okay.
I'm just starting to sort of get my voice down there, and I wanted to create something a little more organic this time. I've talked with, organizers about, potential fiscal sponsorship, if there's money that comes in. I've taken some steps, but no, I do not have any web page. I'd still really like to be mostly anonymous and nameless. But I would love to see. Yeah.
I just want to ask you too about what you said. So at this point, you don't think that a revolution is in the offing, and that
I don't think there's a left, really. So.
And I mean, I tend to agree with that. I don't know that I don't know your politics exactly. I'm not, I would imagine that I don't know that I would constitute your notion of what the left is per se. Maybe in part, but not full bore. Obviously, I'm sitting here doing, in part, I'm monetizing this, and so it's I think that's a fair critique of what we do here. But if I understand you correctly, reform not going to get us there. And so the idea is to make sure that in the event of a crisis, it could be another financial crisis like 2008. It could be another COVID. It could be something that is climate related. It could be, frankly, 2024 and Donald Trump again, or Ron DeSantis, or an 8-1 or 7-2 Supreme Court. I mean, there's a whole host of things that could constitute a crisis in that matter. And the idea is to have a structure that is able to sort of mobilize more people, bring more people into a movement, and to generate ideas that exist and become, options that can be, picked off a tree or even picked off the ground and used in response. Do you think there is value? I mean, is that's I'm just characterizing what I think you've said.
Yeah, just quickly, I would say what I would like to see as far as building goes are basically, Highlander is a sort of the Highlander folk school, something along those lines, but in, accessible population centers, not out in the boonies, which is where so many of our sort of retreat centers are. We have to have dual power institutions that teach about mutual aid, direct action, actual organizing, community self-defense, how to grow your food, how to fix your things. And so I think we need to build for the current crises and for the collapse and for the post-collapse, because unless there are institutions and alternatives on the ground that point the way forward for a brighter, more humane, more sustainable future, then we'll be, praying to sky gods and demigods and demagogues and crisis cult leaders. And I think we go further to the right into really scary kind of fascistic territory. So I think that it's imperative that we build institutions that we have not been building for 50 years. We haven't had structural institutional organizing centers since labor died and labor halls died. And so we need to get back to that, because the church the right uses the church as their structural organizing center. And at the time that they've been, crushing in that department, we lost labor, and we have not had structural organizing ever since. So that is my main goal in this endeavor. I think that it's time to rationally think about not, I have a few guns and a few acres, but really, if some things fall apart, that we have something on the ground at a critical mass, at a sort of a critical consciousness, so that there are alternatives. And I think that's the best hope, is now that we have either an economic or a political or both kind of collapse before we have an environmental collapse, because
let me because it's completely on brand for me to say so or to ask, do you see any role for reform in that calculation? Because from my perspective, I believe that there are some structural reforms, not ones that completely overthrow the hegemony of capitalism, but there are structural reforms that can weaken some of the most powerful players who are maintaining our system, A, and B, can strengthen, things like unions. Now, I know there's some people who think unions are not necessarily, are simply sort of play into capitalist hands, but I am one who thinks that there is value in unions. Do you think that there's any room for reform politics within that framework that you're talking about?
I'm becoming more and more torn on it, Sam. I always was a fan of reform. I always thought that you sort of broadened and opened up, more opportunities for leftism of other sorts through reform and reformist actions. At this point, I must say I'm almost getting to an accelerationist mode, where I'm thinking, let's take us down politically and civically, and just because I think the environmental collapse coming first would be maybe homicidal, given how many nuclear weapons are out there. So I think that's a very complicated question. I am for reform. I think my critique of you and sort of these podcasts that have sprouted up like crazy since COVID, as you've probably noticed, is that there's too much focus on sort of reformism. There's too much focus on electoralism. You don't have enough of the movement sort of leaders and sort of that side of things on. So our movements could be a lot stronger, as I said, if we actually built. And if you notice, I'm a big supporter of the cause of Black Lives Matter. But have they been building in communities? No, they have not. And I think we may have actually lost some institutional will or memory of how to build. So to get back to your question, yes, I think there are some reforms that are positive, and I don't want to knock it, but I think that over-focusing on electoralism when we're so late in the game is a sort of form of Confucianism at this point, and that we should be focusing really rationally on, hey, is it too late to change this? Are we too indoctrinated with 10,000 ads a day and all the propaganda that we really don't talk about, you know, how it affects our
I'll tell you
consciousness?
So if people are interested in joining you, what should they do?
All right. Let me give you, I just signed up for Instagram reluctantly, and I posted some of my photos from down there over the past week, and anyone who's interested can reach out to me by Instagram. Is that legitimate?
It's fine with me.
Okay, well, my Instagram is, I'm a record collector, so my Instagram is Private Press 81. as in 1981. I'm turning 40 in 4 days. So,
okay. Happy birthday. Private Press 81 on Instagram, and people can find out more. And if you want to send guests that you think that we should have on the show, by all means, please do. Send a
Absolutely. I'll be in touch with, I have many connections in the activism organizing world, and I will look into that. But thank you, Sam. I appreciate the time, and thank you for the support.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Private Press 81. Private Press 81. I thought at first there was like 80 other private presses on Instagram. But no.
That's the year.
All right, let's go through. Let's monetize some of the right, shall we? With that said, I think that I think that his critique is a fair critique. I definitely think that there is tremendous value in taking his perspective on preparing ideas and ideologies and structures in the event that there are crises. I think that it's not necessarily an either or, but maybe that is a nature of like my politics, that reform, there are reform measures that can make that can make it easier to develop these structures, frankly. Like antitrust, I think, is big. And I don't know if we can repeal Taft-Hartley, but that would be great. But the PRO Act, I don't know that there's much of a chance of it passing in this context. But, I think it's valid critique. And so, check out Private Press 81 on Instagram. In the meantime, in Brazil, there's been protests for a while, but it seems like they are getting bigger and stronger. Brazil has a death toll of over 500,000 as of Saturday. And for a country that, they have caught up with us rapidly. We're not quite, we're 600,000 plus, but, Bolsonaro has been.
Bolsonaro.
That's the thing. Dave Rubin has gotten into my head.
Bolsonaro.
Bolsonaro has absolutely failed. Not just failed in terms of executing, but also just whatever it is about these guys that they don't want to recognize the existence of a.
Well, he got COVID.
Viral pathogen.
Tore his mask off while actively infected with COVID while speaking.
What is behind that? Why would you do that? Is it just that they feel like if they're a strong man,
he denied vaccine supplies? What was that? A few weeks ago it came out?
Brian Meir of Brazil Wire has reported that there has been talk among officials in the Brazilian government about how much money they're going to save by old people dying and not having to care for old people. So I don't know if that's explicitly what explains fascists like Orban and Bolsonaro having just death rates that, where you just kill a whole bunch of people with this virus.
Narendra
basically.
Modi put that in the same category. Yeah. Trump, right? Like there was part of that as well.
Right. I just died, but I guess that makes sense. I also just realized that Brendan misspelled it on our sound sheet. So that's why.
Oh, that's what it is?
Yes.
Yeah.
He spelled it Bolsonaro. Like Dave Rubin said it.
Yeah.
Did you do that on purpose?
Say yes.
No, he didn't.
Say yes.
He was listening to Stephen Crowder while he was doing that.
Oh, if Stephen Crowder said something at all.
We never said that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
All right, here's a clip of the protests, massive protests in Brazil.
Just if you want to just turn our audio over it. I mean, just a quote from November that I think exemplifies exactly Bolsonaro's attitude. I'm sorry for the dead. I'm sorry. We're all going to die one day. Everyone here will die. There's no point running away from it, running away from reality. You need to stop being a country of queers.
And they're yelling, I think Bolsonaro needs to go. I think that's basically.
I mean, and especially with the return of Lula da Silva, I mean, it's going to be a very interesting next few years in Brazil for that reason. And it's the kind of predictable outcome when there's a fascist nut job like Bolsonaro in office.
Let's play this clip. This clip came from last Thursday, actually. And, you've heard Tucker Carlson go on, talk about how horrible masks are. And even Steven Crowder, apparently, when he was going into it with Ethan Klein on H3.
Bolsonaro was also talking about it.
Yeah. They all say that masks are horrible. Now, it's quite easy to find studies, genuine studies, that have been peer-reviewed and that have gone through rigorous, scientific methodology, that masks help. They are not a 100% guarantee. What they were saying the whole time was like, it's a Swiss cheese, is the way that you protect yourself. And you keep layering more and more Swiss cheese so those holes don't line up. It's like polarization of like glasses. I mean, it's the same concept. We only let in so much sun. Every time you overlay another thing, it gets less,
wearing a hat and
UV
being
rays.
under an umbrella.
And yeah, exactly. I mean,
and having sunscreen on.
Right. But masks, where masks are adopted, and it's hard to necessarily parse out, well, are masks an indication that people are taking it more seriously, and so there are other practices that they're engaging in? But it's quite clear that mask mandates weren't necessarily helpful, but wearing masks were. Now, the reason why mask mandates weren't successful is that it's such an obvious thing to do that the only reason why you wouldn't wear a mask is because you are pissed about being told that you should wear a mask, and you've been told by idiots about it.
Or because you just can't handle a piece of cloth around your mouth and nose.
It's not pleasant, but it's certainly doable, and it definitely limits or mitigates the spread of COVID. That's just the bottom line. But there's one thing to wear a mask. It's another to be pissed that other people are. This is how a really juvenile mind functions.
Oh, anti-personal choice.
Well, what it is like people are like, ugh, you're being so responsible. You think you're so great to wear masks. And I don't like that.
I don't like they are so resentful of liberal moral superiority, which they see as like some sort of this is like a physical manifestation of that.
Right.
Which is like I got news for you. It's reality.
This is like your rights don't just end where my nose starts.
Yes.
Your rights end where you actually have any part of your body that exists. And so here is some and these guys are actually like, I think these are like some type of religious dude. They are harassing kids who are like, God, I wish I had kids who would just sit as quietly as this. Look at this.
What are you doing out here?
Look at these idiot face masks.
Out here? Why are you wearing a mask?
Turn up the volume on that.
They have you out here masked?
You don't need to wear them, you know that. Why are you wearing it?
Why the hell are you wearing a mask out? Where's your mom and dad? What?
CDC said we'd die if we didn't.
CDC says you're gonna die?
Yeah. How come you ain't dead yet, then?
Yeah.
How come you're not dead? Take it off.
Now, I should say, this was recorded by I think they're a religious couple. I can't remember exactly who somebody had ID'd them.
They recorded it and thought it made them look good. It's very Jimmy Dore of them.
Yeah. And I love the fact that the guy's saying, like, you idiots, just as he can't figure out how to reorient his phone in such a way that he can get all of them in frame.
He's like, I want the full picture of the children I'm screaming at randomly to be accurately presented. There's three.
3 children. I want to be able to, you idiots, what are you doing? You're not dead yet. Well, I mean, honestly, like what kind of mentality is that's like?
Tucker Carlson kept saying if you make your kids wear a mask, it's child abuse. I wonder what he thinks about random adults harassing children at bus stops.
Yep. Pretty special stuff from those folks. They just can't stand the idea that, and it's sort of interesting to watch them flail around. I feel like there has been a absolute failure of any of the right to get a narrative that is permeating the non-right. Now, that may not be relevant ultimately because, I think they're really turning our democracy into like a minoritarian rule. But it is, it's fascinating to watch this. They're also going in on inflation. I think the other day I said that lumber futures were down, which is a big indicator. And there was a story about that in the Times today.
Right.
Just as the Republicans are adopting inflation scaremongering as maybe an electoral tool or maybe just as a way to like inhibit what the Democrats do with infrastructure.
Also a way to tap into the Bitcoin bros who point that as one of the big liberatory things about Bitcoin is that it'll control inflation.
Yeah, that's a great point because that's the new iteration of libertarianism. So
I'm not quite clear on how that was supposed to happen. How does Bitcoin...
well, supposedly because there's only a certain amount of
finite.
Bitcoin that can be coined. So that's why it's attracting all these gold bug idiots.
Right. And that controls inflation because they're saying that we need to peg our dollar to Bitcoin?
Well, the Bitcoin's going to replace the dollar once it turns out everyone just sees the
because there's a finite amount of it, so it can't be inflated, and inflation is not a problem in dealing with it, even though just a handful of wealthy people hoard all of it.
Do you know what
That's
would be
not
a great
problem.
way to make money? It would be to print or create something. It doesn't actually even have to be tangible, but if you were to create it and convince people that it was going to replace money and you had it already, you could dole it out, particularly if there was a finite amount of it, or if like you could only be generated with a lot of money to begin with.
Or like say you're a nation state that like just invests, or just a big corporation that invests in mining equipment.
Yeah. And you could print that stuff and say, this is going to replace the dollar and get people to buy it. And it would go up for a lot of the people who have it at the beginning.
A lot of the well-connected media people.
That would be a really good way to do it, to get people who had like a big platform to talk about how great it is. And then it would create excitement around it. And it would never actually have to be anything to make a bunch of millionaires. That would be a great way to make money. But of course, none of us can do anything like that because we don't have the computing power to create that.
No.
But what if we got, I was thinking maybe if we got like some type of flower, like a flower that's only around for a certain period of time. Like
I saw a
tulip or something.
I saw a story, I think it was in the Financial Times, I tweeted it out, but apparently a problem with divorce settlements is that men are putting money in Bitcoin, which is harder to find by divorce lawyers. So I think that might explain a little bit of the value.
Now you tell me. Now you tell me. We were thinking about taking Bitcoins back in the day for membership, and I just never got around to it. Now you tell me. Thanks, Matt. Johnny come like 20 minutes too lately.
Save yourself a little digital nest egg for your single life.
Exactly. Well, so much for that. Looks like it's just going to be blue shirts from here on in, folks. Speaking of new revenue streams, imagine if you're somebody who had sold some really rich right-winger on the idea that like we're going to get college kids to buy into this completely reactionary ideology. And the way we'll do it is that I'm almost young enough to be a college student and I'm going to go there, and you can believe me, I'm like young. And if you find a really old guy, they're going to be like, this kid is young and he seems to know what's what. And I'm a guy who was a good judge of character, and I'm going to figure out what this guy is doing. And that's how Charlie Kirk started Turning Points USA. And then he made a bunch of cash from it, and it raised a lot of money. But then the guy died. So what do you do in that situation? Well, welcome to the world of sponsors, ladies and gentlemen. Here's Charlie Kirk.
About a year ago, I could barely walk down the street or sit in a chair for more than 10 minutes without horrible pain. And now look at me.
That's what
I'm
young
here to
kids
tell
say.
you about Relief Factor, the 100% drug-free supplement that's helping tens of thousands of people, young and old, to get out and stay out of pain.
Go back. We gotta watch it again.
Wait, I want to see the whole thing.
I think that may be only his part in it. Can we just watch it one more time?
So is he one of like a bunch of people on there who's selling a pain medication that he has? I mean, you know,
He's not
I don't
even
know.
prominently
Like,
featured.
We promote
he's-
Seder on this show, and but I don't know. Do you really believe that he couldn't walk around? Like, what was that? What was going
Yeah,
on?
well, I mean, it's like not helpful to his. You must be right that like the I'm one of the college kids grift is over, because advertising for a product about how you couldn't get out of your chair, aches and pains, it doesn't exactly scream, "Hey, I'm a part of the frat."
And how old is that dude? He's got to be still under 30, right?
Yeah, he's younger than I am.
And he shows that he's active by like barely tossing a football.
Well,
like,
did they show his full motion? I
12
would like to
feet?
see that.
I mean, this is the kind of toss. Like Saul and I play catch in his bedroom like that.
Let me see.
Honestly, like, and do we even see if he reaches there?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
No, they have to cut in
it's
between.
a cut. Yeah, oh, there we go.
Wow. They can't even show that he can't. I can't even make.
Syndicated radio personality. Who's the random guy, too?
That's my friend.
That's his producer.
Yeah, hey guy, let's go out, throw the old pigskin around, and so I can show how active I am.
You know how funny it'd be to like tell Charlie Kirk to keep going deep and then just overthrow him every time.
Well, I mean, look, we all suffer the indignity of promoting, products, I guess, on some level. But I just find it hard to believe.
It looks like it's a TV ad.
The supplement, that the
Who's
supplement.
this for?
I think it's for this supplement that apparently his mystery pain went away.
Right, but like, who looks at that? I mean, he's not recognizable to the kind of person who's going to want to buy that.
I think it's for old people on. I think they know him like on OWN or stuff like that.
Okay, so it's that kind of target.
Speaking of football players, Rick Scott at the Faith and Freedom Coalition weighed in on football players.
Gotta be good.
Here he is. He gets a little bit confused about what happens at sporting events, I think. Here's Rick Scott. This is the place where Mike Pence incidentally got booed.
Yes.
Grandson to a military museum. He's going to be a paratrooper like my father. And so the guide said, he asked the kids, if they knew the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd never heard it before. I've never heard him say it before. I was proud. They gave him a sticker because he said it perfectly. So why don't we do it together now? Let's stand up. We believe in it. I pledge to the flag of the United States of America.
Looking around for a flag.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Wait a second. When do they do the Pledge of Allegiance at a sporting event?
They don't. They do the national anthem. So we got a little confused, as you say.
That's a little weird.
But wait, but he hasn't even gotten there yet, right?
Okay, here we go.
That's what we believe in. I want my grandkids to believe in it just like I did. Unfortunately, we're living in a nation where these woke, rich, pampered football players are kneeling for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh.
Nope.
But when you watch your grandkids and you watch other younger people, the younger generation, you see that we're not losing. If we stand up every day and fight, we are winning.
How old does he think professional athletes are?
I'm so proud of my dad.
I mean, how rich does he
did
think
all the combat jumps
football players are?
As a member of the 82nd
On
Airborne,
average.
he would be so proud that his great-grandson stood and could say the Pledge of Allegiance at a young age. But you know, the bottom line is going to take this. Every day, each of us, we have to say, part of our day, we're going to fight against this woke mob and these radical Democrats who are trying to absolutely destroy this country and the values that we grew up with.
Well, there you have it. We're having a sound issue on that, right? Like, I think. What's that? Oh, is that what's going on? I don't know, but.
Okay, well, he doesn't know the difference between the
there you
national
go.
anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance, and yeah, I mean, I know.
So wait a second. Football players are not going into schools. Professional football. Let me just want to be clear on this. Football players, professional football players, are not going into schools, waiting for the bell to ring, and when they have to do the Pledge of Allegiance in the schools, and then running into the classroom
they
and kneeling.
bust through the door of
I
Mrs.
feel like
Johnson's
a lot of kids would be
classroom.
pretty excited. Like, oh my
yeah.
God, look at that.
Yes, I mean, like, what annoys me about that is just, one, most professional football players aren't rich. They're often tossed aside and have like bottom basement contracts, and then they make 2 years of it and they go on to live their lives and their bodies are completely destroyed. But it's just because they're black, so he gets to say that and use it as some sort of cultural football. And also, the whole kneeling thing was Kaepernick going out of his way to appeal to these exact kinds of people. He consulted with somebody who had been a veteran, and he thought the kneeling was a sign of respect. And it became this whole thing where, like, they, no matter what the original intent was, they bastardized it and made it into some kind of, sign of disrespect, which should show everybody that it's not really about the content of what they do or the way people protest. Because again,
well, that's the thing. It's like as soon as people start protesting and blocking streets, they're like, why can't you just do a protest that doesn't interfere with people? You mean like kneeling during the national anthem at a football game? Well, that's...
But that's why I just don't even like go there. Not even putting aside, I think it was actually like thoughtful of Kaepernick to try to do that, I guess, because whatever, he was trying to anticipate it. But it's just a lesson that no matter how fair you try to be to their perspective, it's always going to be twisted because it involves black people.
Well, yeah, and what you said about really, they have a problem with the content, but they're acting like it's about the form. If Kaepernick was kneeling to say, like, I want to remember Iraq veterans or something at this moment, those people wouldn't have had any problem with it at all. It's just because of what he was saying with it.
Yeah, exactly. But they always flip it and say it.
All right, let's take a couple more calls, and then we'll take some IMs, and then we'll have to wrap things up. Obviously, we got tied up with all this business about Crowder at the beginning of the show, but it will pay off.
It will bear fruit.
I think so. I think people are going to have fun with that.
I'm just hoping it was recorded. Like I have like a panic in my mind that somehow there was some sort of glitch.
Pretty sure it was. Punch Bowl News, Senate Majority Leader Schumer is now backing Senator Bernie Sanders' plan to add dental, vision, and hearing coverage to Medicare. I mean, we are seeing, just some internal negotiations, and that's what we're seeing. We're they are creating space to allow Joe Manchin a win by denying people material benefits. But that's what's happening there. Calling from a 517 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
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 Hello? Oh my God! Please tell me you can hear me.
I can hear you. What's on your mind?
Okay, sweet. Yeah.
Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is LJ from Michigan.
LJ, what's on your mind?
I'm actually kind of excited to hear the Crowder thing. I'm looking at his tweet and it says the 978D chest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's kind of obvious that he was monitoring your feed.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see. You're going to have to wait and see. Maybe that comes out during the conversation. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, well played though. That was really cool. That was a fun story. But I was actually kind of wondering, with all the silliness that happened with Demi Jor and TYT.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious on your thoughts of the dumb left, or at least the terminology of that, because it's been a while since I've heard that term. And after everything kind of happened and people have been going like deep dive analysis in that part of the community or that part of the left, I was just like, does that really have any efficacy anymore, that term, the dumb left? Because are we really dealing with low information people, or are we still dealing with like right wingers?
I mean, that was a term that I think Michael coined when we would talk about Jimmy Dore and some of his acolytes at the time, like H.A. Goodman.
Oh, man.
And I don't know if people remember that dude. And it really had to do with the fact that Jimmy was just peddling ignorance. And he really was. I mean, people can go back to the original debate that we had, which people, I guess, there's a lot of people who don't seem to be aware of it and the context for that. I think I think that terminology is less accurate these days, because I think there is a just sort of like I'm not sure what you could call it, some type of like anti-establishmentarianism that is I would need some time to actually think about it a little bit more. I mean, I think there is still some elements of like sort of this sort of dumb, but I think it's less operative. Don't you?
I mean, I think there was always sort of baked in the cake that some of these people might be like operatives, like the Green Party in general, for instance. Like what? But I think, yeah, like saying it as a dumb, you know, as Michael did, it gave the benefit of the doubt in terms of intention, which then you can just get to, does this actually work or not?
But it was probably, as Sam said, that made sense at the time, but now it's become so monetized that, you know, the incentive structure has changed even more.
It's kind of frustrating too, because like, I mean, you guys talked about the Vanguard before, and I just stumbled across one of their videos one time, and they were like totally mischaracterizing a dialogue between Emma and Matt, and it was one of the most frustrating things to see. But anyway, yeah, so
Really?
you guys do a great job. Yeah, you guys do a great job, and I'll go ahead and get out of your guys' hair. But thanks for taking my call, and keep up the good work.
Appreciate the call. Thanks. ASIAC. Sam, I listen for political commentary, not to be edged for a half an hour about a potential Crowder-Seder debate. I can't tell if that is a sincere comment, but I can tell you this.
I mean, they used edged.
If that is a sincere complaint, all I can tell you is you will have to tune in to the other 14 and a half hours of programming that we're going to do this week. And if that's not enough, you can also tune in to the other 5 hours that are free, available on the Peacock app. So you're down to 18 and a half hours of like non-edging Crowder. Although I will say this week, it's probably going to be closer to like 16 hours, because I have a feeling we're going to spend another hour and a half.
I mean, I think he's just unhappy that we have not revealed the extent of the conversation. The edging part is that you've not, you know.
Well, I mean, part of that is, to be honest, is like none of this would have happened without H3.
Yeah.
And it's they set it up. I'm just trying to respect their ownership of the drama that took place up to there. And now look, I am sensitive to the critique. This is silliness. This is YouTube, stupidness.
Oh, did you see what Tim Pool said?
Yeah, Tim Pool said
drama grifters grift on drama.
Yes.
Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. But the bottom line is this: is that like I have always seen this show as a way of basically moving people left from where they are. And that could mean somebody who's a libertarian. That could mean someone who is a conservative. It could mean, somebody who has no ideology.
Somebody who's just taken like Steven Crowder out for a test drive because they're just deciding to get into politics, maybe.
Exactly. And it can also mean liberals and pushing them left. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who listen to this show and we're probably, either politically disengaged or to the right of the show who are now to the left of me, at least. And
well, for a fact that's happened.
I look at that and I go, that's the point of what I'm doing. And so some of it is going to be appealing to some people in the audience. And for some people, it's going to be like a little bit too, basic, essentially. But that's what we do here. And for the most part, that's what we've been doing the entire time.
We got hyped by Hassan. Actually stoked on this Sam Seder versus Crowder debate. I normally despise debate culture, but this one's going to be spicy. Excited to see what H3 Productions cooked up. And
I think the word spicy did come up, actually.
Yeah, he said, to be frank, I don't even know if it's a debate or not. Just excited to see what's to come. Yeah, I mean, that's accurate. We don't know
I
if
think it's going to be, people are going to find it interesting. And my hope is, Stephen just tweeted a short video with you in it.
Oh.
Yeah, well, we anticipated that might happen. Let's take one more phone call. Calling from a 559 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Whoa. Okay, this is Nick, and I'm in Japan.
Nick in Japan. What's on your mind? Nick in Japan.
I can't believe I'm actually on the show. It's really, really late or early here, both. Okay, so I wanted to call in. I started listening to you and some other, left-leaning progressive media since the election, election day. Okay, and in that time, I've realized that my mom has gone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, so I realized that my mom has gone pretty far down the QAnon hole.
Oof.
Over 2020. Well, and it was a really big point of contention between us. We went, I think, months without talking for a while.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But I want to say to other people who are listening and can identify with that, I think the iron is hot right now. It's hot for the striking, because I've been talking to my mom a bit more lately, and she's starting to have a lot more serious doubts about all this conspiracy stuff. I mean, like she's even said that she thinks like Trump might be like something that was like prophesied against in the Bible. Like she's very conservative Christian.
So she's starting to think that Trump may in fact be a false messiah, and even worse.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yes, but she's not quite sold on that yet. But when I got to talking to her about the specific things that she feels about like what's going on, it's definitely all the populist side of Trump. And I was able to point out to her, actually, like everything you're talking about, this is the exact same things that, for example, Bernie Sanders talks about. And I made the agreement with her. I agreed to watch some hour-long video she sent me. If she would watch the first hour of Bernie Sanders' old filibuster video.
Oh, wow.
And, and she agreed, and she did it, and she realized that, like the way that he's been presented to her was really
wrong, false,
skewed. Yeah, and there's certain things where she can't at all align with Bernie Sanders or the left in general.
Sure.
In particular, abortion.
Right.
Abortion's a hard issue that can't be crossed really. But she's realized that slowly starting to realize that things aren't exactly the way they've been presented to her. Now there's some very big problems, like Trump and the QAnon thing and all of this stuff. They've all instilled a really deep distrust of any kind of media. Like I can send her an article from ABC about an arrest, someone being indicted, a police report kind of thing, and she says, "You trust ABC?" They don't make up arrests, but it's that deep. Like, facts are to be doubted.
Right.
But I think the iron is hot, and I think that people need to they can take advantage of this to reframe things and say, look, you don't need this huge conspiracy of a cabal of whatever. Like, she hasn't made it to the point of the Jewish question there yet. Yeah, I'm so relieved about that. But I reframe things to her and say, look, it's all really simple. You only need to look at a profit motive.
Right.
And, that explains everything.
Right.
No child sacrifice, none of that stuff. You don't need any of that.
Right.
Profit explains everything.
Right.
And so everyone listening, I know so many of you have the same problem. Please take advantage of this moment with Q's promises failing.
That's
and that's
great call. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
And I'll call again someday.
Yeah, do.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Thanks. JJ Cool says, "Hey Sam, as a loyal fan who watches MR every day for many years, I do question your tweet this morning. You're going to want to watch today? Implies that there are other days that you're not going to want to. Which days would those be?" Well, I said that in terms of like, you can watch the show later, but today to see it live, I think would have been a real treat. Let me put it that way. And also, some Tuesdays are not so. I'm joking. Let's play what Stephen Crowder posted. Let's see how accurate it is, because we're going to have everything that Stephen Crowder posts, ladies and gentlemen, about this. I think Ethan is going to go through second by second and make sure that Stephen Crowder is not manipulating the video. Because remember, for Stephen Crowder, the worst thing you can be is to lie.
Well, yes, let's watch it.
Let's play it, because I haven't seen it. You guys have
do we see how he captioned it? Because I don't understand it. You and I can talk about it. It's appointed to a man once to be invited on this show at H3H. Can
you understand what that means?
No, it's very bizarre.
It's appointed to a man?
It's appointed to a man once to be invited on this show. It sounds like he's like giving some sort of
it's like he's trying to be grandiose or something.
Right. I feel like this is Jane Austen. Why is he trying to etiquette?
It's like Matt, do you not know what that means? Because if you don't know what it means.
None of us know what the fuck it means.
Yeah, no, my best guess is kind of what Emma said, which is like when you challenge someone to a duel where you take your gloves off
you and I can talk
and
about
slap them with
it's appointed to a man once to be invited on a show.
Yes, thank you, Aaron Burr.
But then I sort of feel like there should be like another clause. However, when one is appointed, one should always wear one's long coat.
Well,
but no, he doesn't do that.
No, he brought his holster
let's play
for the duel.
play this clip. Here we go.
I don't think I've ever seen a more perfect encapsulation of groupthink.
The CDC is like this whole governmental body. Just tell us what to do. You don't have to think about it, dude. Obviously, my point is that if you're so fucking stupid, then yeah, you should listen to the CDC, bro.
You and I can talk about it. It is appointed to a man once to be invited on the show. And if you don't, if you decline, and everyone now knows that you will, but I will never address you again. I bet this guy's going to do anything he can to avoid actually debating.
I didn't want to make it too easy for you.
Oh, okay.
So I prepared.
I had no idea this was going to happen. You know,
Stephen, you're wearing
that we
a holster.
agreed. Yeah? So?
Go full on and monetize it. The question is he going to play the whole video?
Absolutely not. He's going to play about that much and say that Ethan was afraid and tried to mention you as little as possible.
Yeah, does he not realize that Ethan has the whole video and is going to play the whole thing where Crowder...
before you even came on, he said, just so you know, we're both recording this. And Crowder goes, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, but he can't just ignore it, so you need to do something. So this is his limited hangout, and he's going to hope that most of his followers don't follow through.
Their editor really got on that quick. We need to get... All hands on deck. All hands on deck around here.
Yeah, shout out to the editor that's going to be working extra hard today.
Exactly.
I hope you get overtime, buddy. I've seen some talk that Crowder has some difficulty paying his producers. So
is that right?
I've seen that before, and I don't know if that's true, but we can get into that later. But just make sure that you're covered because you're going to have to be working hard today.
Well, I mean, there's not enough dubstep music in the world that's that they'll be able to access to paper over what happened.
It's appointed to a man is a reference to Hebrews 9:27. It's a Bible reference.
Is that vaguely anti-Semitic towards you?
No, I don't think so. It's probably anti-Semitic to Ethan. Ronald Reagan, this Crowder thing makes the time you paid me to go to Dave Rubin's show look like small potatoes. Train Boy, great news. 2 months after my surgery, the tumor indicated protein levels in my blood have returned to normal. I'm not out of the woods yet, but my doctors are very pleased. I am too. That's the Train Boy. Oh, Asiak said, I enjoyed it. No, I enjoyed it. It was not, they were being facetious. Prairie Fire Kowalski. Hey, MR, sorry about the call quality. Folks, I'm sorry. We're done with our phone call portion of the show. Sorry about that. But we will take more calls tomorrow. Hey, Amar, sorry about the call quality. I failed you. My prairie, the cows, and the republic. Commodity prices should start to stabilize rapidly aside from the food due to biological reasons over the next few weeks. Shipping companies are getting their fleet straightened out too, plus production of base goods are ramping back up to meet normal demand and building the surpluses back up. People who say we're on the verge of inflation are just wrong. Supply of cash in the economy is still less than 2019. Between the rich hoarding wealth and not spending, plus fewer wages, and no one having savings doesn't make inflation an issue. Left is poggers. I would also add we had an emailer that works in in the shipping business, and apparently containers coming from China. There are so few that were online because they go back and during the course of COVID, they're all in the wrong places. And so containers are hugely expensive right now in terms of like what they're shipping. And so, and this again is something that the containers exist. They're just in the wrong place. The rhythm of the, transatlantic, trans-Pacific shipping has been upended, and eventually it will catch up and it'll work itself out. The inflation that this sort of short-term inflation that we're dealing with now is short-term. Rental cars is a perfect example of the dynamic. During COVID, nobody was traveling. Nobody was renting cars. Nobody wanted to get into a rental car because it was like, wait a second, do I really want to get into a car that somebody else has been in? So what do rental car companies do during that? They sell off their fleets of cars. And then all of a sudden, one day, over the course of like a month, everybody is traveling again. Like it really went from 0 to 60 in just a matter of seconds, relatively speaking. And people need rental cars. And the rental car companies, they don't have the cars. They sold them. They anticipated, they were trying to survive. And they're like, we need to buy more cars. But of course, it's not like the car companies are like, oh, we're completely prepared to have extra new cars for all these rental companies. So they're backlogged. But it's not like we don't have the capacity to make cars. It's not like we don't have the factories to make cars. It's just that we need a little time. And there you go. So that's what's going on there. The Biden administration initiative to combat extremism is essentially only a draft memo with no legal grounding, correct? That's my understanding. It would need to be passed through a legislation or an executive order before it became a reality. And the number of people going, we told you so, over a memo, instead of organizing to fight against it, is extremely telling me about their actual intentions in participating in politics, i.e. moral grandstanding. Yes, I would agree. I mean, people should be alarmed. It's an indication of that it turns out that Joe Biden is a conservative Democrat who has been in politics for 50 years and is exactly the person that everybody anticipated he was, and would have some things that are better than Trump and other things that are just as bad as Trump. And it turns out that Joe Biden is that guy.
Yeah, shocker.
Louis, I'm looking at my, all right, we'll get 5 more minutes. My mail-in New York City ballot and the line to wrote in someone. Let's say there was a popular movement to write in a guy named John Smith. How could it ever be proven which of the thousands of John Smiths were they intended? Seems like this one would be a tradition that would be scrapped. Utter nonsense. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Mike, love the new mix. Fart face. I was so excited to see the QAnon prank clip presented last Thursday from the Not Even a Show. I would absolutely love to see Chris James on the show again as a guest. That guy is just rude. He's called in and pranked the show. I would never. I would never. Constantly classic lefty prankster.
Did you see the QAnon call?
I didn't see it.
You should check that out. It's
I
very
will
funny.
check that out. P.S. Thank you for accepting my last guest request. I very much enjoyed your conversation with Ben Burgess. Well, Fartface, you know, why wouldn't I let someone whose handle is Fartface not program this show?
Obviously.
Gigajab. What's with all the doom and gloom about the House in 2022? Lots of the kids that got involved with politics last summer were under 18, and a bunch are going to be eligible to vote. Besides, the Republicans are super divided. Traditionally, off-year elections go to the party that doesn't have the president in office. There is a lot of gerrymandering that has taken place. There is voter suppression. We'll see. Animal Psyche just became a member today. You all do great work. I'll give you one of these. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charge. What are your thoughts on congressional term limits? Always hear that brought up by friends and family, but I'm conflicted. It's conceivable to me that I would sign on to 8 consecutive terms for Congress people, but term limits is not so much the issue. I mean, you're still going to have the revolving door. You're going to still have the exact same sort of, I think, incentive structure. I guess you could argue that if someone's there for only one term, then they're not going to get paid as much money. Maybe it's less valuable.
I think, yeah, it kind of is just something you hear thrown out there by people who may be a little more apolitical. I think it would have pretty much a zero effect on our the perils that our democracy is facing. It's very small thinking in my view, not as an insult to your family and friends, but.
Brock from VA. Sam, your daughter selling her own clothes is one thing. Now she's selling your clothes to Emma. She's gone too far.
There we go.
Chris from Taiwan. I'm amused that the offensive language did or did not make it into the new edit of the DJ Danarchy music.
Oh, we got new music? We don't hear it now.
Aaron is not cool. We'll hear it soon. Another guest. Instead of Crowder not showing up, he knew you were going to pull the old switcheroo, so he booked the men's right activist shows to debate you. I'm going to get in touch with that guy. I just haven't had the time. It's going to take a while. Justin, I love you guys. Wipes away tears. Cold-free Crowder is great, but now you should also be paired with pound smiley face. I don't know. My border collie named Sam. Crowder claimed another emergency, ran out of the room to change his undies. We read some of these already. Melancholy, his wife gave birth. Mailman Paul, Crowder's dad, jumped on the stream to yell at you. Winnipeg Craig, thank you to Ethan and Dan, those beautiful geniuses. Yes, my sentiments exactly. Stephen's dad. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you can click for a link from the IMs. This is Stephen Crowder talking about how predatory gay men are and they recruit children. Wow, so glad you did this. He's a piece of garbage. Hadn't seen that one. I'll check that out. Joe from Dayton. May I have a shofar from my mother Christy? We already did that. Brother from Brooklyn. Dude, just debate Bongino or Shapiro. That would be equally satisfying. Maybe if they go to Politicon. If that comes up, I will definitely do that. I mean, I don't get the sense that necessarily they're interested, but Bongino, they offered me a couple of years ago. I had no idea who he was. I wanted Rubin or Crowder, and that was when the whole Crowder thing fell apart. And I think that's how I ended up with Kirk.
Yeah, Shapiro will be equally elusive.
Did Crowder just pretend that Sam wasn't there and just keep asking Ethan why he was doing a Sam impersonation with his voice? That would have been smart. That would have been a better play, frankly. Yeah. Russ Bell, Sandinista. Damn, the things Sam's does for the bigger game plan. Jersey Max. Is Bitcoin just a pyramid scheme? I don't know if it's a pyramid scheme per se. That's a technical thing, but
It's not, yeah.
I think it's just more of like it's a collectible.
Yeah.
It's a collectible.
It's like buying a signed jersey.
It's a collectible that is sold on perhaps a faulty premise, but maybe it becomes. It's a collectible that also has value in terms of hiding money and laundering money. So it's. But I guess other collectibles are like that too, right? Like, I mean, if I'm like, if I had, get away with like hiding money from my wife during the divorce by buying a bunch of baseball cards.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, these baseball cards, they don't mean anything to you. And I bought like a $40,000 baseball card.
It's like when people like hide their blood money in art.
Yeah. Mind Pillow Guy, Stephen just tweeted a short video with you in it. Yes. We saw it. Funky Town. When someone harasses me in public for wearing my mask, my response is, oh, honey, I don't normally wear this, but I smelled you coming. And the final I am of this really, really fun day. Miracle Seeker writes about Hebrews 9:27. And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this, the judgment. I don't know what Crowder was on about, but folks, Matt, Brendan, Emma, very challenging day today. You guys did a great job, and it paid off. We will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth